Begin, Emanuel.
Welcome, everybody. Emanuel Pastreich, Director of the Center for Truth Politics at Green Liberty. And today we have Wade Frazier, who's an expert on energy and energy policy. And we're going to talk about the elephant in the room, which is how energy and access to energy and dependence on energy is used to control every aspect of our society, from our culture to our politics to our economics, and how it's linked to a truly suicidal drive to make us dependent on particular kinds of energy. And so we'd like to welcome, we have here Chuck Fall from Green Liberty Caucus and Mark Rolifson, also in Oregon, working with the Green Liberty Caucus. And we will engage Wade in I think, a very, very valuable discussion. So please get us started, Wade.
Hi. So, well, I had a long list of notes, etc. I don't know how relevant that's going to be to our conversation. I don't, it's the thing where again, we have an hour. So let me see what I can do in an hour. So I guess just to start with, I was involved in the energy industry back in the 1980s. And in fact, the long story, but my first professional mentor invented an engine that was considered by a federal study to be the most valuable or the best engine for powering an automobile in the world. And this was, in the mid 70s. And what happened was that I was on the scientific track. I had some events happen and I changed to studying business. And then I became the CPA. And what happened was that through some very strange circumstances, I ended up working for a company in Seattle, Washington, where I'm from. And they were marketing the world's best heating system, which if you take, again, it was a heat pump with these huge evaporators, and what it did was it reduced the energetic cost of heating by more than 50%. And so if you took gas, oil, or electric resistance, it was less than half as much energy was needed to produce the same amount of heat. And so this was the world's best heating system. In fact, it still is. And then that company actually put it on people's homes for free. Back then you had Jimmy Carter's tax credit. And so you could actually sell a $10,000 piece of equipment. They would literally pay you $4,000 if they get back on their tax return. And so they'd only pay the remaining balance of what they actually saved in energy. So anyway, this was something, and the man who ran the company, who owned the company, he actually believed the full page ads by the electric companies that said, we want energy conservation. And back then in Washington State, electricity was 1 penny per kilowatt hour. And it was the cheapest electricity in the world, because of all the hydroelectric projects here. And so so everybody here with baseboard electric. And then they had the biggest municipal bond default in United States history at that time to build some nuclear power plants that didn't get completed as usual. And then the electricity started going through the roof, and he saw these full page ads. Again, a very long story, but the bottom line is he thought they would love him. He thought he was bringing this, but the thing is that 85% energy savings was more than electric companies had in mind. And so they were selling air-to-air heat pumps that would save 50%. And 85% was all they saw was billions of dollars in lost revenues. And so anyway, so what happened was the local power structure in Washington State wiped the company out. And so this was something that I missed most of those fireworks because I was there for the death throes of it. But and then what happened was that the global elite, and this is something that we didn't. If you'd have told me if you'd mentioned global elite to me, 40 years ago, I had no idea what you were talking about. And so what happened was, in fact, the Rockefellers got involved, the Mormon financial empire got involved in wiping out and then stealing the company. And what happened was that the owner, this amazing man named Dennis Lee, he would not stop. And so, in fact, he was planning on competing with the electric companies to actually produce electricity. At the time, he didn't know how. But anyway, so what happened was you ended up going to the East Coast to Boston to rebuild. I had a childhood dream of changing the industry because of my mentor's engine. and he couldn't get rid of me. So I moved to Boston, became his partner, and we actually started chasing free energy. And anyway, and it was originally, his original concept was a kind of a naive one, although I've seen a lot of scientists who thought that it may have worked. But what happened was about 2 months after I became his partner, we started putting on shows. Some nondescript businessmen showed up to our office and offered us $10 million for the idea. And we had no idea who these, well, a decade later, I understand that was the standard friendly buyout offer. So this is something that was a pretty normal situation where these kind of ideas just get bought up. And so then what happened was that my
bought up so you'll never use it, so it will not be used.
Oh, it's shelved. Yeah, it's called
right.
It's called black shelving. Yeah, so this is something that a man who was interfaced with these people. Long story with him, but over 30 years ago, he interacted with a faction of the global elite, and at that time they say they had paid out $100 billion in these kind of buyouts. And so the number's probably double that by now. And so in fact, it was 10,000 people at an average of 10 million each. And so this was and again, you'll never see this in the papers, but this is how this works. And so then what happened was
Wade,
yes.
Can I interject? So
Yes.
You're basically explaining that there are people who are very smart who are inventing devices that you say, quote, create free energy, but we know there's no such thing as real free. I mean, you have to build the unit that's going to capture whatever, just like you need a solar panel to get the solar radiation onto it so you can get the electrons moving. There's always going to be capital investment. But the point is, you're describing systems that do, in fact, reduce energy, get people off of petroleum or alternative energy sources. And Nikola Tesla is the most famous one, apparently able to capture electricity in our atmosphere and then channel it. And so maybe you would speak concretely and then about some examples. But what you're really describing is that we don't have a, quote, free market system, because the free market is being controlled by what we're calling a kind of global plutocratic power structure. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there are no free markets. You know, there's no such thing as a free press. Okay.
Right.
There's no such thing as a democracy. Okay. These are all ideals that really don't exist in the real world. Okay. And so this is something that there's never been an ideal implementation of the scientific method. I mean, these are ideals. And so, yeah, the free market idea is definitely a great propaganda prop of capitalism, you know, to talk about all these free markets, and they really don't exist. And so this is, and when you stumble in, like, you know, let's say we stumbled into it, when we stumbled into what we stumbled into, initially thinking that we would be welcomed to getting, you know, quite the opposite treatment. This is when you start realizing there is no free market. I went to business school, right? So the wonders of capitalism were, you know, that was what I was raised on, was the wonders of capitalism. And so then we found out the hard way. There are certainly no free markets, particularly in the energy industry. And in fact, later on, I've learned, and again, independently, I studied all these, but there's about 7 cartels that control the global economy. And they're all sort of interlinked, but the energy industry is the big one. So that's the one that everything is below that. And so these guys have, and again,
say what the 7 cartels are, and then loop back into your discussion on energy.
Okay, the 7 cartels that I've been told. Again, in fact, I've seen them all in action, so I'm like, okay, I'll buy that. So energy, medicine, media, military, intelligence, organized religion, and banking. Okay. And so those are the 7 cartels that control the global economy, and they're interlinked.
Sounds about right.
They're interlinked at the top. My understanding is, in fact, there's a lot of conspiracist literature around these kind of things, which most of it is probably off base. Again, the people who have interacted with the groups that exist today, there's been a few entities that have been named, but the identities, almost all the rest of them, nobody knows. Okay, and there's about 200 to 300 people who control the policy. They're the policy setters for the world economy, and there's about apparently a couple dozen at the very top. And so this is the world power structure, and all the Bill Gateses and the Elon Musk and the Donald Trumps. These guys are way down the food chain, you know, from the people who really call the shots in the world. And they don't have to micromanage things. And so as long as you keep stuff like disruptive technologies out of the public's hand, it kind of takes care of itself. And so there's a lot of effort in making sure that these disruptive technologies do not make it into the public's hand. And so this is something that, and again, I'll skip ahead a little bit, but it's a thing where the next year after we got offered the 10 million, we actually moved my hometown to Ventura, California. My mentor came forward with his engine. The bottom line is we were going after free energy. Also, we had the world's best heating system though to also sell. So it was like we had something that was already viable, and then we were pursuing the free energy. And what happened was that we got taken out very harshly. Got a raid. In fact, they stole all of our technical material. And then my partner, Dennis, actually had a meeting with the CIA. And a CIA man offered Dennis $1 billion to fold the operation. And when Dennis refused the $1 billion offer, then a couple weeks later, he was jailed with $1 million bail. And that was the worst year of my life, was when that all happened. And yeah. So and then I'm going to fast forward a little bit. So when I became his partner, we didn't even know there was a free energy field. In fact, I was so ignorant, I had never heard of Tesla. Okay, and so this is something that we were kind of babes in the woods, you know, lambs to the slaughter, if you will, with the global guys. And so what happened though is that we were a mecca for a while there in Ventura, California, and the stories that we heard from people who came to our office telling us what they had been through. And it didn't matter if you were a billionaire. If you crossed these people, it was you know, billionaires would say, okay, here's the deal, you're done or your family's dead by dawn. You know, this kind of
I've seen that repeatedly myself, where I met people who were extremely wealthy and influential, but with certain issues, when they got orders, they folded immediately. There was another level.
Yes, they know, okay, or they somehow. So for me, it's like I don't know exactly how much, let's say, Bill Gates or Elon Musk knows, but they got to be really naive not to understand that they're nowhere near the top. Okay, and I think that anybody who starts poking around those areas, they are dissuaded. They are discouraged, and if it comes down to it, they are told in no uncertain terms that they are not going to get involved. And this is something that, and I've seen this repeatedly, and so I've seen this repeatedly in these areas. And but anyways,
Wade, can I interject again? My question is for you to you're describing people who had actual inventions and business to take business product to market. Describe some of these? Give us some concrete examples of, I mean, you say the best heat or so on.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there. The more mundane thing was just, again, the world's best heating system. And it's a thing where this was a heat pump that would get efficiencies that were, again, nothing else in the world gets those. And so, again, it's because this huge evaporator panel that interfaces with the environment. And again, this is where you study thermodynamic theory, for instance, you learn in week 1, Carnot and his equations, et cetera. And the bottom line is that for heat engines, so you take electric power plants, et cetera, you know, they have 2,000-degree boiler temperatures and the exhaust to lakes, et cetera, and they get about 40% efficiency and also 40% of the theoretical maximum, which is called the Carnot equation. You flip that around, a heat pump is the opposite, right? So the heat pump is the opposite of a heat engine. And what it is that the air-to-air heat pumps that you guys live in Oregon, you see the air-to-air heat pumps, they get about 10% of the Carnot ideal, okay? And so what it is this heat pump with these big panels actually got about 40%. So it was actually kind of on par with heat engine efficiencies. And so it was like, again, 3 times as efficient. as the standard air-to-air heat pumps, and it delivered about twice as much energy. And so again, it delivered heat at half the energetic cost of baseboard electric, gas, and oil. It's still the world's best heating system. And there's actually a company in Portugal that still makes them, but it's been totally wiped out in North America. So it's in North America, they're gone. And so this
Okay,
is
so let me
that
just
was
jump in again. So you're describing uh, a really good product that gave, as you described, these great efficiencies, and it
Hmm.
would have, as a consequence of that, whether you believe in global warming and climate change or not, it would have a lighter ecological footprint of the
Hmm.
user and human. I mean, if everybody had these, we would have
it would
lighter
use less than
ecological.
half the energy. Yes.
Okay, so I'm just to as a parallel. So you're describing the suppression of this technology. Technology is being suppressed, and I'll remind
Hmm.
everyone that in 1938 hemp was declared illegal on association of being quote marijuana, the and so on. And so there's a clear conspiracy by the federal government and DuPont and apparently even the big paper Randolph Hearst to suppress hemp and elevate the petrochemical industry. Is there a parallel between the suppression of these technologies that would give us, quote, free energy and the suppression of hemp in order to give the petrochemical industry an advantage and so on?
Hmm.
Could you speak to that and draw out that parallel if there is such a thing?
Yeah, so going back to there's no free markets, right? And so what it is that vested interests have I call them rackets. Okay, so they have this system, okay, where they're selling a product, let's say, to consumer, who's oftentimes a captive consumer because they eliminate all the alternatives. So you only can buy
Right.
this. Okay, so you like try to get non-toxic cancer treatment in the United States. You can't get it, you have to go to Mexico, right? So it's a thing where there's a
Right.
monopoly, okay, that makes sure that the public only has one place to go to get some product. And so anything that's going to upset that is going to get either bought out, wiped out, whatever it is, but it's going to upset the whole system. And so these players who have immense power and control of the system will ensure that these will not come to market. And it's the thing with
Right.
the free energy field. In fact, there was a movie that came out a couple of years ago about this exact topic we're talking about, and the author rattled off 8 of the tactics of organized suppression. Well, I lived through 7
Hmm.
of them. So I lived through 7 of the 8. It's like, okay, yeah.
Right.
And so when people like that do that, and you're like, yeah, 7 of the 8, I lived through those, then they have a lot of credibility with me, And so that's the same guy who actually talked to the people who said, yeah, we paid out $100 billion so far. The number, I'm sure, is
Right.
doubled by now, at least doubled by now.
Right. Right. Right.
Yes.
So,
Well,
question here.
Yes.
It looked like you had mentioned in one of your Substack articles, David Rockefeller was kind of one of the people that was involved in suppressing technology.
We ran into them.
And then what about the Bilderbergs or the Rothschilds? It seems like they're big, powerful names throughout history.
So we've had encounters with the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, okay? Except, and here's the deal, they identified themselves. Yes, David Rockefeller called my partner at home, when he was running a full-page national ad on 100-mile-per-gallon carburetor, and he called him before the ad ran and asking about the ad. And then,
wow,
long story of this, but the bottom line is that the Rockefellers and Rothschilds are not at the top. So the people who identify themselves that way are not at the top. Okay.
Right.
And maybe once upon a time they were, but again, so to fast forward just a little bit, one of my close associates in this field, we're going back now 30 years ago, he was kidnapped and kidnapped and taken to an underground facility, and it was demonstrated a whole host of technologies, okay, that are not on the market, okay, which free energy was among them. And his eyes were this big around by the end of the show. And so, and this was, in fact, he had no idea who did it. In my circles, I have a pretty good idea who did it, at least how to say it. I have a pretty good idea of what their role was, let's say, and I think this was a dissident faction of a global elite. And so if we're
Right.
talking about global elite, and we are, I have some good news though, is that they're fractured. Okay, they're dissident.
Right.
So, you know, my friend being kidnapped this way. In fact, I've purposely not known a lot about this meeting because the people who put it on risked their lives to put this show on. But they have them. And in fact, what it is that, again, back to my ignorance, I heard about this show long before I started hearing other people talking, people who, you know, Disclosure Project witnesses and stuff, who's starting describing these technologies. And I'm going, oh yeah, that's what my friend saw. And so anyway, it's a thing where and again, my understanding is they've got technologies that looks like a magic show. Okay, and it's probably 1,000 years ahead of what you're seeing on the market today, some number like that.
Hey, can I add another interjection?
Yes.
David Hughes wrote an essay on his Substack in defense of Judy Wood, and he makes an observation based on her finding of those buildings coming down, that technology was used that we don't know about. And it's not public. And so David Hughes guesses that it's some possibly kind of cold fusion technology that would produce a quote free energy, that the powerful elite, use technology for a wicked purpose to bring those towers down, but that technology could conceivably be used to produce a quote free energy systems that would provide a lighter footprint.
True. You know, I don't think Wood's proved her case, but I understand the concept of that. They may have used some exotic technologies to take down the World Trade Center. I'm not sure they needed to. You know, thermite probably could have done the deal. The bottom line, in fact, you know, my work's comprehensive, and I don't know if any of you guys have seen this, but one of my friends was a man named Chris Black, who was a very heroic international public human rights attorney, who actually defended Milosevic at the Kangaroo Court Tribunal there. In fact, he thinks Milosevic was murdered. Other people think he was just criminal negligence. But anyway, what happened was after 9/11, he actually asked Milosevic what he thought about 9/11, and Milosevic said in 1998, 1999, Osama bin Laden was in Yugoslavia. He was in Kosovo. In fact, he'd earlier been in Bosnia, and he was actually directing the troops on behalf of the CIA, et cetera. And Milosevic actually called Bill Clinton to say, "You got your guy here. I want you to remove him from the field." And Clinton refused to. And so Clinton refused to pull out Osama bin Laden from the field in 1999. And 2 years later, he masterminds 9/11, huh? And so anyway, so Milosevic was highly skeptical that Osama bin Laden would have been a protected asset of the American president who would have somehow engineered 9/11 2 years later. So anyway, so yeah, there's a lot more than meets the eye to 9/11, and exactly what that truth is, I don't know, you know. And so, but that's something that there's a lot more than meets the eye, that's for sure.
I want to talk a little bit more about the larger equation of energy. So, and maybe in a sort of constructive sense, like how can we democratize energy? What are the first steps? I mean, we know there's overwhelming barriers to us set up by corporations, by government, by classified directives, by all sorts of means. But history has shown changes. It's not impossible, even over overwhelming, obstacles. It is not impossible to have real substantial change. So, what do you see as the necessary steps for the democratization of energy to actually get the people producing their own energy?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that question. Yes. Well, I have not given up, which is why I'm on this show, right? And so it's a thing where I've seen I've been involved with, I was involved with 5 different efforts on free energy. I've as an astronaut named Brian O'Leary. In fact, he was the most controversial astronaut, and he became my friend. And Brian was, if there was a spokesman for the free energy field, it was Brian. And Brian ran afoul of the military, again, who tried to kill him. In fact, shortened his life. And so Brian died in 2011. And back to your question. So it's a thing where I have an approach that I think will work if I can find the people for it. And it really is, in one sense, it's not too hard, but in the other sense, it's very. And what really comes down to is that the people who are going to do this, and people, it wouldn't take very many people to actually make this happen, except the people who do this have to have their hearts in the right place, for one. I mean, that is number one with a bullet. And this is something that, again, and what I saw over and over and over again is that the free energy is so tremendously overwhelming when you start understanding it, that it generally overwhelms people. Like free energy inventors. In fact, this guy who's like me, Stephen Greer, he called it crazy inventor syndrome. I call it inventoritis. But anyway, what happens is that inventors, it goes to their heads, and they think they're the second coming of Christ and the Messiah.
Right.
They expect to be paid $1 trillion and all this kind of stuff. And what happens is that, I had companies stolen from underneath me twice. That's the thing where, and we survived dozens of attempts to steal our companies, et cetera. The capitalist approach won't work, and so this is where, in fact, when they're offering you $1 billion to go away, I call that capitalism on steroids. I mean, this is something that is super hyper capitalism.
Wade, just to interject again. So the question is, and you're just about to get to it, what could a handful of people, if their hearts were in the right place, what could they do to democratize the access to the free energy systems you're aware of?
So free energy technology, and so let's say version 1.0. And so the technology that my friend was showing was 35th generation, probably of stuff that was developed in the 1950s. And so it's a thing where 1.0 is enough to end fossil fuels, to, everybody in the world can have access to energy at levels that are above industrial world levels by quite a bit. Again, how much do you want? And so it's the thing where 1.0 technology is not that difficult. And so, in fact, when we were being wiped out in my hometown in California, there was an inventor right down the road from us. In fact, my astronaut friend knew him. One of my associates visited him, and he had a solid state free energy device that he built in his workshop. Now, he was a career scientist at General Electric, so it wasn't like your average tinkerer, but he built something that produced 1.5 million times the energy that went into it. And so he did it in his spare bedroom. Now, and here's the thing. So we can talk about Tesla, we can talk about Murray, we can talk about quite a few free energy inventors over the years. And Brian, again, my astronaut friend, his last years, he spent a lot of time trying to educate the public on the gulf between having a working prototype and something that's ready for the public to use. Okay, and there's a huge R&D project that would have to do that. Back 20 years ago, Brian said $100 million. Maybe it's 200 million now, but it's some number like that. It's $200 million to actually produce public-ready free energy technology. And in fact, in my circles are people who know how to build some of this stuff. Okay, and so it's a thing where, but it's not safe while you're one guy working in his workshop. Or I mean, you need to have strength in numbers for this to work.
So Wade, you're suggesting then that there does need to be a movement of the people to take some command. Do the people need to make a kind of energy commons to have a shared purchasing power to build the units to produce the free energy? So we, how could that look, the democratization process for getting the free energy into the hands of the people?
So, okay, so I'm trying to make this point clear, is that if you have, again, a public ready free energy device, and one of the misconceptions is people think they can build it in their garages and their workshops. Think more like an Intel facility, okay? For the stuff I'm aware of, it's going to have to be made professionally, industrial level. Again, this is a consumer product, let's say. And so in what I envision is you only have to make one, okay? And you're going to give it to the world, okay? So and believe me, everybody is going to want one of those, and everybody's want to build one of those. And I think that if one of those is demonstrated in a way that is irrefutable, that is unvariable, this will bring the world to its knees, okay? And it'll bring the global elite to the table, okay? And nothing short of something like that will, in my opinion. And so it's the thing where, but again, that effort, and I've said it before, if I can get 5,000 people that can actually get, I call it trained up, to you get a comprehensive perspective, understand what the stakes are, what the opportunities are, and they can hold the vision, it'll attract 100,000 people who are going to do something. If that happens, the hard part's getting the 5,000, but if that happens, the rest will be easy. It really won't be hard, okay? And so the technologies are, a lot of people have stumbled upon tapping the 0-point field. This is not that tremendously difficult. Now, I'll caveat this with about 99% of the free energy inventors out there who think they got something don't. Okay, so it's harder than the YouTube clips and stuff will make it seem. Okay, but it has been done. And if you do it, and again, this is unfortunately the experience of my fellow travelers, that if you do it and you're the one man in his shop, they will come for you, okay? And they have. And if you survive the experience, they will confiscate your device, okay? I said the lucky ones, so-called lucky ones, are the ones who took the money. They took the $10 million.
So wait a minute. Let me ask a question real quick. So how large is this device, and how long would it take to produce
Sparky Suites, Sparky Suites, the one that produced, again, Sparky. In fact, I put clips of it on my site, and it's out there in movie stuff. So Sparky's, it had like 300 microwatts input and 500 watt output, and it was about yay long. It looked like wasn't a whole lot bigger. It looked kind of like this. Okay, it looked kind of like this, and it put out 500 watts. And again, this was just Sparky's prototype. And so it's the thing where and it was, again, solid state. It was magnetics. So Sparky did it with magnetics. And this is most of the 0-point stuff I'm aware of. The versions I'm aware of were through magnetics, either rotating magnets or solid state. It's not the only way to tap the 0-point field, but it's one of the ways. And this is again, David Bohm, who is Einstein's protege, he actually called it a plenum. So he said, space is not empty. It's actually full of energy. And this is something, it gets into quantum physics and these kinds of things. But anyway, so it's a thing where building it is not that difficult. It's just that a guy in his garage, if he's lucky enough to tap it, because they can detect it. So it's like, there's nowhere to run and hide. This is one of the messages that, again, people who've been through this have had to tell people. It's like, don't think you're going to sneak past these people. You're not going to sneak past them. It has to be done in the light of day.
So wait, so Emanuel, let me interject. And I've been interjecting a lot, and I appreciate your being gracious.
That's fine.
But here's what to the question of democratizing our energy supply. I mean, I'm a green libertarian. I subscribe to libertarian municipalism. I participate in an egalitarian vision of society, and that's where the people own the commons and have a commons, and we need to create an energy commons. And one thing that could happen is, imagine free, people taking over their cities through democratic voting process. We take over the cities, we fill them, the cities, with the city council with elected green libertarians, and then 10 or 12, 20 cities all pass a bond to raise $100,000 for 10 years, and they put that into the fund, and they take these prototypes and they build them, and then they sell them to the people in the city, and the people buy them from the municipally collective confederal, business cooperative economic system. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not too complicated, because
Yes.
what's happening is you're describing good tech being bought up and shelved, black shelving. I never heard that. That's a new term for me. So this is what Green Liberty's up to, is imagining and talking about and building a politics around democratic destiny. Otherwise, we're doomed to a technocratic fate of an
So,
emerging techno-totalitarianism led by transhumanist
there's
globalists.
another question though. How much would these things cost to manufacture? Like, let's say one, or say you're going to manufacture 5,000 of them, or more. I'm assuming the cost would go down, but like
So,
just what's how much are we talking about? Like, what would you end up selling them to consumers for? How much would it cost to manufacture it?
so yeah, we can do that. We can talk about dollars and cents to take to manufacture something. And again, what I've said again repeatedly is that for probably $200 million, let's be generous, $500 million, you definitely could create a mass production facility for free energy tech. And let's just throw out a number. It could produce 50 kilowatt hours, 50 kilowatts, right? So produce 50 kilowatts, which would power your house. In fact, let's 1,000 kilowatts power a whole neighborhood or something. And so anyway, you could probably, materials cost, and again, this you get to start getting strategic materials, et cetera. But let's say you could do it for $100 a pop. Okay. So once you got it going for $100 a pop, you could do that. And
So you're saying for
all the
$100
logic
per
of
unit.
that, believe me, it's going to end the world as we know it.
You're talking about $100 per unit.
Let's just say, and all the energy. And again, what's going to happen is that, and this is, I've been living with this now for almost 40 years. What's going to happen? In fact, my partner, he talked about selling free energy, and all of a sudden your electricity bills go to zero, people, all these kinds of things. And it's like, it's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. And what's going to happen is, because energy scarcity, even in, I'm a member of I'm the most privileged demographic group in world history, right? I'm a white, straight, professional, male, boomer American. And it's a thing where I consume about 100 times my dietary calories every day. Okay. And it's the thing of, you go to Ethiopia, it's not that, it's a tenth that, if that, right? And so it's the thing where if everybody in the world all of a sudden had, how much do you want? Okay. Then what's going to happen is that the change is like the biggest event in the human journey. And in my opinion, the biggest event in the human journey will happen when that happens, and everybody is empowered. Everybody has as much energy as they need. And what's going to happen is you'll find that, for instance, cities, and I get into this in my work, but basically cities will become obsolete. The cities as we know them will cease to exist. A lot of things about our world will stop existing, and nobody will miss them. And it won't have to be coercive. It'll just be, yeah, that doesn't work anymore, and these are some of the
Wade, where will the cities go? What will the cities become when they become obsolete, and what will they look like?
Ever watch Star Trek?
No, I mean, you just said with the energy transformation you're describing, cities will become obsolete. What does that look like practically? Do people live in the countryside spread out, and they're not concentrated in cities anymore?
Yes, yeah, you'll see that, and you'll see off-world. Again, Star Trek. And so it's the thing. The technologies that exist on the planet, it would be Star Trek. Okay, we have Star Trek level technologies on the planet today, and we don't get any. Okay, because the global elites are playing their power games. Okay, and so it's a thing where, and again, the kind of mentalities that exist at that level, people try to figure them out and try to wrap their heads around it. I'm not sure. It's not easy to, and sometimes it's probably not even worth trying to think the way they think. But there, and again, back to dissident factions though. So the really dark faction, they'd happily destroy the planet. If you had a choice of lose your power, destroy the planet, they'll pick destroy the planet because they got
It
underground
looks like that way.
enclaves and stuff, right? And so, but the dissident faction, the people who kidnap my friend, etc., they're the ones who have grandchildren. They don't want to live on Mars, this kind of thing. And so they'd rather not ruin the planet in pursuit of power games. And so it's a thing where that all will end, and they know that. And this is why these technologies have been as suppressed as they are. And back to when you're talking about a bond and getting some stuff going, and that's all a wonderful idea if the right people can do that. Absolutely. And again, that's what I'm talking about. The capitalists won't work because everybody's trying to steal it. The inventors go crazy. I mean, it overwhelms people. I mean, this is what happens. It overwhelms people. And this is something that people who will be involved have to have their feet very firmly on the ground. Okay, because it is people who have interacted with me a little bit ended up in mental institutions. This has happened, you know, so it's something it's tough. So go ahead, Emanuel.
I wanted to present some maybe alternative views. They're different perspectives. So I guess two things. The first is the idea of conservation and getting away from a society based economic system based on consumption, on this idea of growth, of overproduction, of waste. That this seems very fundamental to me, and I'm very hesitant, and I think I share this perspective of others in embracing some vision in which there's some magic technology out there, and until we get there, you know, we can't do anything. So I would say tomorrow, right? We want a local level. I mean, if I can produce electricity using solar panels or windmill, or, you know, just using my exercise bike or my horse or whatever, that I can sell that electricity to my neighbor. We can set up a system in which, you know, you can produce energy yourself and sell it to people around you, that you can take out, you know, loans for 40 years that make solar panel affordable. Right now it's set up in this impossible way that people can't possibly use it. So your technology may be true. It may, I mean, I don't know the technology well enough to say anything, but suppose it's true, but we're not going to be able to get our hands on it tomorrow. There are all sorts of sort of intermediate steps that can be taken.
Yeah, well,
maybe.
I hear what you're saying. And for instance, that heating system is still the best in the world. And there's a company in Portugal that makes it. And actually, it looks like they make an inferior version of it. And it's been totally wiped out in North America. That's something. I mean,
we can't use it because of patent
cost by more than 50%. The energy costs get reduced by more than 50%. In fact, today, there's still nothing on the planet other than the sequestered stuff that would have as big an energy impact as that. And it's been totally wiped out in North America.
Is it control of patents that keeps us from using it? Or is what is exactly that keeps it off the shelf?
So, well, what happened to our company? Okay. And so, you know, again, the idea of bonds, all this, it sounds nice. And what'll happen is that any effort along these areas that the power structure will deem disruptive, one day you think you have $1 million in the bank, and the next day you don't. Okay.
Right.
Or
well, that's real.
You know, or your head engineer suddenly dies. You know, what an untimely demise. All these things. I've lived through these things. And so these are the things that happen. So it's a thing of the effort. Again, back to it has to be strong in the force. Okay. It has to have a very strong foundation to withstand these things. And so, yeah, back to baby steps. Sure, that heat pump is still the best heating system in the world. Okay, now.
Hey, Wade, could you put the link in the chat to the company or just the name of the company in Portugal that sells the best heat unit or energy unit that you're aware of? You said it's an inferior quality, but
I don't know how to do this. You're saying during this session now?
No, not. Let's not try to do it now, but just share it on.
Yeah, I publish it. Yeah, I write about all this stuff. Yeah, so
okay,
I can use
that would be good information for us to have.
Just to give a.
And
I'll just tell you that what I've seen and what I've heard is that, and again, new technology, any kind of new technology has to go through a phase of, refinement. Okay. And
Right.
so the thing of, and this, in fact, back to my partner, and again, long story, but at one point back about 40 years ago, the chairman of the board of American Express understood with my partners, use the tax credit, put it on people's homes for free. They paid for the energy savings, and American Express was going to put up $1 billion to carpet the United States with its heat pump. And that's about that same time as partners decided to steal the company, the mob stole the rest, and it was all over. And so this has happened repeatedly. But where I'm going with this is that the refinement of the technology is part of the process. And the bottom line is that today, starting from scratch, my guess is it would take $20–30 million to get a heat pump operation like that going from nothing. Some number like that, be my guess. But you can start carpeting with that. Now the thing is that this isn't the right forum to talk about the technical issues, but there are a lot of technical issues to deal with. But it's a thing where it's the best. But how to say it, you just can't pop the lid open and say, here you go. I mean, it's something that is it's a tech development issue. And so to make it, again, back to, in fact, what my partner was doing, he was trying to industrialize it. So the original company that was making these, they basically sold you a kit and you put it together yourself. It's like a science project. So half the people who bought it installed themselves. So you can't carpet the United States that way. And so that's what my partner was doing, was trying to professionalize that. But anyway, where I'm going with this is that there are technologies to do these things with. And yeah, there are some easy wins that you could get if you're looking for easy wins, but they're, how to say it, they're not that easy, but definitely, again, it's still the world's best heating system. It's still the stuff you see on the market today. It delivers heat for less than half the energetic cost of the stuff that's on the market today. And so it's a thing of, still, I mean, as far as you talk about sort of more orthodox technologies, that it's still the biggest one I know of that it would be an easy win. And but you got to ask yourself, and again, we could talk for a long time about why it doesn't exist in North America any longer, and that's a long, grim story. And so you're up against a lot of forces and a lot of inertia.
So Wade, the why is that the petrochemical elites, power elites, don't want this because it would cut into their profits. They have a monopoly market.
Profits, and ultimately it's about control.
Okay.
Control, right.
Ultimately about control. And so they get to bestride, they sit astride humanity. Okay. And as one of my friends said, that's one of the most powerful aphrodisiacs, right? Well, Kissinger said that or something. But anyway, so power, yeah, I mean, these people who get billions and zillions or whatever becomes power after that, right? And so my understanding is that it's all a power game, is what it is.
Well, so if we have a situation, say, for example, this free energy device, or for that matter, other alternative energy sources, and it requires an initial investment of, say, $1 million or $20 million or $50 million, right? I mean, we can all understand that, but all of us know, or we at least we have the impression that if you needed, $50 million, right? This doesn't grow on trees. It's not a lot of money, but anybody who can give you $50 million is already plugged into the system. So although it's not a lot of money, they won't give it to you. So in some ways, it seems like the fundamental issue is how can we raise this money among ourselves? And sadly, a lot of this sort of crowd funding, et cetera, has itself been taken over by global elites. So, crowdfunding is a joke these days. So
yes.
How do we get back into real crowdfunding so it actually would work?
And so, again, back to how to say it, for instance, again, that the company in Portugal who makes this heat pump, people could see it and they could watch it work and they would see what happens to energy bills. And it's a thing where a lot of people, how to say it, I'm looking for the people who like for instance, I have not, well, I've seen Sparky's, but I didn't get kidnapped and given an underground show. Well, I have no doubt that stuff's real. Okay. A lot of people are like, this is the nutty stuff you see on YouTube every day, right? So it's like, this is all nutty stuff. And so, but like that heat pump actually was revived in North America, and people could actually, see it. And again, it's how to say it. It's the refrigerator turned inside out. So it's not that sexy. It's not that, but if you actually understand something about energy bills, you say, oh, the energy bill just declined by 2/3. That's something, right? In fact, and so it's a thing where if they could see more like that, then they would be more inclined to maybe take the next step of understanding. And I hate to use the word believing, but they would, maybe get involved more.
Mm-hmm.
Again, what I have said is if 5,000 people were like my partner Dennis, if there were 10 like him and they combine their efforts, it already happened. My astronaut friend, if there were 100 like him and they combine their efforts, it would already happen. Okay, but there aren't. There's one of my friend. There's only a handful like Brian, and so this is part of the problem. Okay, and so it's a thing where, but 5,000 people in the world who cared, who developed a comprehensive perspective, who understood these issues, and they were publicly visible and interacting. And I call it a choir, call it what you wanted, but a public conversation at this high level. If that, because that's never been seen on Earth before. I believe that if you had a conversation at that level of like 5,000 people, it'd be all over. You could not stop it, because the greatest triumph of these people who run the world, okay, is making the world I'm talking about unimaginable. This is the greatest triumph, is making it unimaginable. And so, and this is part of the issue. And this is in my studies. And I've broken the human journey into these various epics. And it's like every epic, nobody ever saw it coming. Okay. And if you to try to tell somebody, if you to try to tell an English peasant in 1500 about what we're doing right now, they would have had no framework to understand any of it. And so it's the thing where what free energy, the world that would come from having the free energy and these other so-called exotic technologies, I've been living with what that means for almost 40 years. And I know that I can barely imagine what that world will look like. And I said, Star Trek is a nice shorthand for it. So Star Trek world, right? You go to the replicator and you say, I want this. And there it is. Okay. And in fact, so a lot of the technical aspects of that world are almost here. AI robotics is like, in my lifetime, AI robotics will be able to do anything a human can do and better as far as a physical activity. Okay, and so physical activity to earn a living, that's going to end pretty soon. Of course, it's all energy intensive, right? And so this is part of the issue, is how energy intensive it is. But it's the thing where, free energy, to me, if everybody had access to it, that would be the greatest democratizing event, okay, in the world, because everybody would be sovereign. Okay, it's like, here's all you make. I mean, again, you don't have to work for the man any longer. Okay, you don't have to work for a living any longer. And this is the kind of thing that Bucky Fuller used to talk about, which is that everybody's going to move up to the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay, self-actualization will be our main preoccupation. Will no longer be survival. Will no longer be doing the things we don't want to do. And
so wait a minute.
And this is what it means.
You're still going to have manufacturing, because people are going to want to wear clothes, and they're going to want to buy sporting goods, and they're going to want to buy cell phones or whatever else, or all sorts of
robotics will do all that in my lifetime.
What? Say that again? That
robotics will do all that in your lifetime. Yeah.
So
but it's not totally. I mean, society is going to have a new energy source, but you're still going to have a structure behind, companies producing shoes or whatever.
AI robotics will do almost all. Do all of it. AI robotics will be able to do all of that. And so, and let me just say this. So, the free energy, the global people have exotic materials that you would have a hard time believing if you saw them. Flubber is not that fictional. Okay, so it's a thing of, it's not just free energy. They have again, they have stuff that is absolutely mind-blowing. Okay. And I'm not gonna get into it all because it sounds too weird, but it's like totally mind-blowing. Where I'm going with this is that anything that you could want, you can have. Okay, materially. If you want material, anything you want, you can, and at no cost to our environment. Okay.
But how's the individual going to pay for it if they don't have, because they're still going to have some source of income to be able to afford consumer goods, unless they're growing their own food. But even that's just food. You got other products besides food.
Okay, have you ever heard, there's a name for it too. They call it the post-scarcity world. You ever heard of the post-scarcity world? Post-scarcity economy?
No.
And it's called post-scarcity. Heck, Wikipedia's got an article on it. Post-scarcity economy means that goods and what we need to live requires no human effort to provide. Okay, so when it requires no human effort to provide what everybody needs to live, I mean, nobody's going to be withheld it, because it'll take no human effort to provide it. Okay, I call it the fifth epic of the human journey, but it's like, that is so close. But free energy, without free energy, none of it can happen. Well, again, AI robotics, yeah, okay, nice, but it's a thing of the energy issue. That's the big one. It has to be solved. And it's the thing where, we can talk about, windmills and solar panels, et cetera. And I don't know how much you might study these issues, but if you look at the world energy situation, again, a bunch of solar panels and windmills aren't going to get it done.
Right.
It's a thing of, and particularly.
Well, I don't really agree with that. I mean, I think it's important to note, just for our discussion, there are different perspectives here, and I mean, Wade is presenting one, which is powerful, but there are some of us who are basically opposed to automation and robotics, that they think they can only, I mean, myself included, who think only used in very limited context, and that actually making things by hand, writing by hand, books, publishing is preferable. That's how humans have existed for the last 15,000 years. And it's to sort of think we're going to suddenly go into this, magic world. Well, at the minimum, I'm skeptical about it. Okay. You're presenting one perspective, but I want to make it clear that there are other people who have other perspectives on this issue.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Can I interject something? Emanuel, you're in Tokyo right now?
I am.
And I'm talking to you just like this?
Correct.
Could you even imagine this when you were a child? What we're doing right now. What we're doing right now. This is mind-boggling. Mind-boggling
right.
to do this. Okay.
Well, I mean, futurism is an ideology which has been manipulated in the past, so it doesn't really do much for me. The issue is, how will humanity survive over the next 500 years? And if we have a plan to move to, say, AI, robotics, which is more fragile, which is dependent on large amounts of energy, which reduces human subject awareness, the brain is forced into these larger systems, which reduce the ability of the individual to think independently, unable to leave traces, because whatever you write can be erased immediately. It's not the same as paper or stone or whatever. That there is a counter argument out there that I think we need to at least engage.
And the people who are, I'll call them anti-technology, if they don't be anti-technology and say, well, yeah, because our tools made us. Okay, we are humans because of our tools, right? And so it's the thing of, for me, the issue is really scarcity versus abundance. And this is how I see the situation. That's the divide I look at, is scarcity versus abundance. Okay, and it's the thing where, again, like I said, I am a member of the most privileged demographic group in world history. I live a life that my grandfather actually died pretty well off, but he was actually lived in a sod hut when he was a child. Okay, and his son helped put him out on the moon. And it's the thing where we've never seen as much change as we've seen in the last century. And it's the thing where, what was my point about that? I had a point, it's gone. But anyway, so it's a thing where, to me, it's scarcity versus abundance. Okay, and this is back to the post-scarcity society. If all your needs could be met and nobody has to work to provide those to you, why would I want somebody to? Industrialization ended slavery. Okay, slavery made economic sense in agrarian societies, and so in industrial societies, human labor got devalued, and so you don't need, again, slavery ended because of industrialization. And
Wait a
I'm
minute,
going with this is that with what I call the next epic, it'll end elites. Okay, don't be.
but somebody's still going to have to program the robots to make certain parts, and they're in. And AI, I think, is kind of dangerous in a way, because it's evolving very quickly. To eventually, you're going to have something like 2001: Space Odyssey, where you got HAL computer deciding to kill the crew. You know, it's like all of a sudden it takes over.
Back to scarcity and abundance. Okay, so if we live in a world of abundance, so in my vision of what I call the fifth epic, safety and harmlessness, that's the only dogma. Okay, everything will be safe and harmless. Okay, and if everything's safe and harmless, and who's going to disagree with safe and harmless if everybody's living in abundance? Okay, my neighborhood right now. So my neighborhood, I'm not worried about any of my neighbors. I live in a very affluent neighborhood. None of my neighbors are going to come rob me, or commit crimes against me, this kind of stuff. And if everybody in the world is affluent, and so, and I give examples of this. For instance, Louis XIV, he was the richest man in Europe 300 years ago. You're richer than Louis XIV. I'm richer than Louis XIV. Louis XIV outlived his entire family. Okay, he again, half the children died up until the Industrial Revolution. Okay, the human journey it has not been pretty. Okay, and it's the thing where you are richer than Louis XIV was. Things you take for, maybe you don't take for granted, but a lot of things that we just take for granted, Louis XIV was like given half his kingdom for. And so it's a thing where, if you'd have told Louis XIV that in our world the children don't die, he would have. I'm not sure how he would have comprehended that the children don't die.
Well, I mean, I think I don't know that I agree with that argument. I mean, it is true that in traditional society, the rate of infant mortality is very high, but you had organic farming, you had self-sufficient communities, you were not dependent on massive global trade, and you actually had people who were capable of a complex intellectual discourse. There was much more written. I mean, the number of people who were educated was smaller, but the quality of their discourse was much higher. And we have now a sort of basic dumbing down. I mean, I see that, at Harvard, or I mean, the quality of the research, the quality of education is not improving over time, in my opinion.
Right. I mean,
I'm more skeptical.
Too. People need a purpose in life, and I kind of like the idea of not having to do a mundane job, because I've, done mundane jobs to sort of fill the void at times. I'm a rock climber, and I'd much rather be out. Most of my life I was trying to climb rocks, and I'd much rather be spending my time doing that or writing about it, but that's what I did. I wrote guidebooks and stuff, but, bottom line is it's very hard to make a living doing it. So yeah, maybe it's great because you would have more free time, and wouldn't have an energy bill, and but to the extent that I kind of fear a society that's run by robots and run by AI too. I think there's got to be kind of a balance, and free energy seems like a good thing in a lot of ways, because it would be, if you could say, rather than have to go home and charge if I'm going to put up a new route, and I'm going to have to charge my battery powered hammer drill, which has, I have NiCad batteries, but a lot of people have the lithium ion batteries. They're much lighter, but you have to go home and power that up, so you're paying for that, even though it's minuscule. But just imagine if that drill was like just kept running because it was run on free energy. I mean,
let me interject here.
Great. I mean, I think that would be great.
I hear you.
So let me jump in and just make an observation that, I read a series of essays by Murray Bookchin. It was called Post Scarcity Anarchism, and he's so Bookchin is in the freedom movement, and his argument, and it's the radical egalitarian argument, which is that the people, if they don't claim democratic destiny by thinking about how to free up from this globalist power elite, then we're doomed, I think, into some kind of emerging digital techno totalitarianism. And so, what I hear you saying, Wade, is that you have a deep conviction for technology that could, liberate humanity from drudgery and toil and free up their time. Now, I accept that, but my argument is that that's only going to be accomplished with an actual democracy movement where
Hmm.
the people are thinking politically about taking control of resources. Now, right now, all of these AI farms are being built out, but you're not talking about building out AI farms. You're talking about a simple device that would be able to produce electricity at high levels of efficiency, at very low cost, and apply across the board for running my tractor to plow my fields, like, and grow organic crops or whatever, right? I mean, and I get that, and I accept what your passion is, and I would I just want to be clear that the Green Liberty Project um, would is in solidarity with this idea that inventors should not be captured and black shelved. That's a terrible crime that's happened, and it's been happening apparently. And I gave the example of hemp, how hemp as a whole vast industry
Happens every
is,
day.
it happens every day. So we need a movement that liberates from this globalist plutocratic power elite that, through their wealth, own our politicians and so on. We all know the story. We don't have to unpack it. But so that's where I'm at with what I'm hearing you share, and that's how I'm going to interpret
Yeah.
it. Now,
And so I hear you.
so, and I'll close with this. This will be my final remark, and um, there is an anti-technocracy movement, which is not an anti-technology movement.
Mhm.
And the anti-technocracy movement is they're against the transhumanist project, which actually has a negative view of nature and sees nature as a kind of failure. And that through augmentation with tech, why we can make nature beautiful and make the human species liberate from the limitations that are put on us. I think Emmanuel and I are,
Singularity, right? Yeah.
yeah, well, I think Emmanuel and I are in a camp that would say, let's slow our education down. Let's put a pencil in the hand. Let's return to the arts. Let's return to music and sound and holistic education, holistic medicine, holistic food, where we're not dominated by toxins and so on. So this is our vision as Green Libertarians. But I have heard so many people share stories of free energy. It's part of our kind of folklore and our culture that there is this kind of thing out there, and I accept that. I mean, how much has been black shelved? I mean, hundreds upon hundreds of inventions, right? I mean, so
Thousands.
we are against that. We are for the transparent openness of ideas and inventions, and of course, there needs to be regulatory bodies to examine our tech and how it's being used and deployed. And I think Emmanuel and I and Mark all agree on that. We're not against regulations and so on. So those are, we've been going well over an hour now, Emmanuel, and I don't know what, we're recording. This is still being recorded, and this has been a very interesting conversation. I think,
Right, right. Well,
uh,
I think maybe we could just have maybe Wade make some closing remarks, and then we can come back to these issues in another event.
yes, yes. So Wade, what are your, and and Mark
Okay, well,
Walton, if you have a
if
thought,
you guys want
let's
to do
do
more, I'm happy to.
yeah.
Again, so the way I see all of this, again, why I lived for so long, is that, and again, this is what I've spent 35 years studying, et cetera, is that humanity is going to survive or will meet its demise around the energy issue. Okay, this is the big one. And if we solve it, truly solve it, because burning through one energy source to burn through the next energy source to burn through the next energy source and make the planet uninhabitable in the meantime, that's not the path we want to go. And so I offer a path to where we no longer rape the planet. We no longer rape each other. Okay. We no longer will have to toil. And the world will end as we know it. And this is what my mission is, let's say, is to end the world as we know it. And nobody will miss it. So with what could very well be coming is that nobody will miss this world. And there will be a world of heaven on earth. It'll look like heaven on earth. And Star Trek's a shorthand for it. And this is what my life's work has been about. And so that's all I have to say. And my final message is the technology is here. Technology is older than I am to do this. And so I'm trying to do what I can to get this technology into the public's hands. And so we'll see how it goes. But I'm not getting any younger. And I may have 20 more good years ahead in me. We'll see how it goes. But I've been at it for over 50 years now. So
Mark Rolofson, do you have a thought on what you've
Yeah.
heard?
Thank you, Wade. This is a great presentation. I want to just point out a movie that came out a few years called Planet of the Humans that talks about the impacts of renewable energies. And, they went into some detail on how much, what it takes to make a solar panel, all the quartz, that has to be mined, and I guess it's blue coal. And a lot of these technologies that were being sold as green technologies aren't really that green. So I think renewable energy, is this is much more green. Free energy would be much more green. And in that respect, I fully embrace the whole idea, and I think it does need to get promoted. And because we need to stop using so much energy, and certainly I think the war machine it's the #1 user of fossil fuels basically, but so we could cut a lot of energy just by ending war. But beyond that, just the consumer bills, I look at the price of my utility bill and just think this is a joke. Who are we doing this for? Is the economy there to serve us, or are we there to serve the economy? And it seems like we're being used as slaves, in a way, wage slaves for the global elite. So we need to move away from that and have more freedom. And and it doesn't mean that I'm not totally sold on the idea that no one is going to have to work, because I or shouldn't work, because I think a lot of people need to do something to feel fulfilled in life, and they need to serve a purpose. And we don't necessarily need robot as our doctor or our psychologist or whatever else, or or a robot instead of an actual woman.
Right.
So that's
Or
my
man.
thought.
Well,
but thank you so much.
Yeah. So I'll just remind that the Green Liberty, embraces the kind of the egalitarian vision for society where everybody does work. There is a kind of an ethic of contribution and participation, mutual aid and solidarity, and nobody goes without, because it's immoral that anybody should go without, given our capacity as a society. And so I think your idea is intriguing, Wade. I think I'm on board. I mean, I think it's a great conversation to be having. I think the green movement should be a champion for liberating the stolen technology. And I think Emanuel and I are strong on calling out state crimes, and the suppression of noble technology is clearly a state crime. Emmanuel, give us a final thought, and then I'll end the recording, and we can chat along afterwards a little bit more. We'll just end the recording.
Just a second.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're
Okay.
right.
Well, I really appreciate having this initial discussion, especially about the potentials for free energy and making energy the central topic, because it tends to be obscured. It tends to be obscured from us in multiple ways, and often, especially in electrification and AI, the expense in terms of the energy using the current model is hidden from us. It made to seem as if AI or the internet, et cetera, is free, right? Cloud servers are free, when in fact they use up an enormous amount of energy and that matter water and other resources. And so Wade's vision for a new approach to energy itself is inspiring, and I hope we can continue this dialogue going forward. And I hope that Green Liberty can put forth a energy policy proposal, which addresses the serious negative impact of current approaches to energy and makes concrete suggestions as to how we can advance liberation at the level of energy.
Thank you very much, Emanuel. Thank you very much, Wade. And Wade, we will, when we post this at our sites, we will give your web information. Yeah, this has been very interesting, Emanuel. You are you've developed a Center for Truth Politics, and this is an expression of the Green Liberty effort. And I commend you for connecting with Wade and recognizing what an interesting person he would be to bring to this kind of conversation. So yeah, okay,
Absolutely.
thank you. We're going to end our conversation or end our recording, and we can talk a little bit more.